Joining us now is staff writer for The Atlantic and host of Plain English podcast, the one and only Derek Thompson. Great to see you, sir.
Great to see you, too.
So you wrote another great, really thought-provoking piece. I was telling you, actually, my mom sent it to me, so, really broke through into the mainstream. Let's go ahead and put it up on the screen. I think this is maybe the most important topic that you could possibly dig into. You say, America is a rich death trap. It's not just the pandemic. For citizens of a wealthy country, Americans of every age, at every income level, are unusually likely to die from guns, drugs, cars, and disease. Where did this data come from, Derek, and what did you find?
Yeah, this data came from new government research on life expectancy in the U.S. And what life expectancy basically does is it's a statistic that synthesizes practically everything you'd care about for a country. Our scientific advances, our drug overdoses, our habits, our culture, our policies, and basically says, if you imagine that someone lives in the year 2021 over and over and over again, exactly how long you expect them to survive. And what this research found is that the number of years that we're expected to survive is going down. That's not supposed to happen in the richest country in the world. It's not supposed to happen in the richest country in the history of countries. Something really, really bad is happening here. And what's so interesting is that it's not just the pandemic. It's the fact that compared to other rich countries, the US does a much worse job of keeping people alive. We drive more and are more likely to die in our cars. We're more likely to die of drug overdoses. We have more guns and are more likely to die at the other end of a gun. There are so many reasons why in this country it seems like we are more likely to die at any particular age and at any particular income level than residents of similarly rich countries.
Yeah, I mean, that's what really is such the horrific part of it, which is that when you compare it to other OECD nations, one of the things that we'll often talk about and discuss here is healthcare. But is it like how much of it has to do with the basic healthcare system? How much of it has to do with intrinsic things that are just to the nature of America? And then what are the areas which realistically we could do something about?
Well, unfortunately, the answer to your question is just yes. Across the board, the answer is yes. Americans have much higher rates of obesity, about twice the average rate of obesity as the average European country. That's clearly bad for preventable diseases, for things like hypertension. At the same time, we have less universal health care and less access to primary care. The US has fewer primary care doctors per capita than just about every country in Europe. And there's some interesting and complicated reasons why that's the case. So I think it's best to say not just, oh, the US has these outcomes because of healthcare, or the US has these outcomes because we're less healthy. I think it's both. Both our habits are less healthy and our healthcare is worse and less accessible.
Let me play devil's advocate here. I can imagine someone saying, yeah, but on the other side of this, you get freedom. And look, Americans like to be able to drive places. We have a car culture that's like part of our history. That's part of our sort of whole thing as Americans. We've got, a healthcare system that fails in certain ways. It's hard for me to put a spin on this one, play devil's advocate, but in certain areas is extraordinary, is world class, is the best in the world. We have, we pay a price in a certain way for our freedom, but these are values that are important to us. And just how long you live is not the only metric of living the good life. What would you say back to that?
Yeah, freedom isn't free. Sometimes it costs you 5 years of life. It's honestly a worthwhile argument. If you were going to give Americans a contract that said, here, based on our built environment, you're going to drive twice as much as basically any other rich country. You're going to be more likely to die on a per mile driven basis. The amount of time that you spend sitting in your car and the amount of time that you don't spend walking, because the average American walks about half the amount of the typical Japanese or Swiss person, the amount of time you spend sitting on your butt is going to add to an obesity epidemic or your likelihood of becoming obese. So you put all of this together, you get more open space, you get more lawns, you get more time in your car, you get less time walking. All of this cashes out in the likelihood that you're going to die 3 to 4 to 5 years earlier than the typical European. Do you accept that deal? Well, I believe in a certain amount of freedom. If Americans got that contract and they said, yes, I'm going to sign on the dotted line, then I'd say, look, that might be their right to live in that way. What I want to do in this piece, what I want to do in a lot of my work, is make the contract explicit. This is the world that we are choosing to live in, a world with a built environment that is less safe than similarly rich countries, and it cashes out in Americans dying earlier at basically every single age, or having a higher likelihood of dying within the next year at basically every single age of their life. That, I think, is an important thing for people to know as long as they're going to live in that world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, frankly, I would defend the Carr consensus, but I think we should be honest about what it is. And so, Derek, what I'm interested in is some of your core of your work for your newsletter. We'll have a link in the description because I really encourage people to read it, is about a quote-unquote American abundance agenda. How does this fit into your broader project of wanting to bring back some of the most innovative periods in American history? Like, is this unparalleled in our history as to how we've gotten out of different scrapes? And what are some of the things we can draw on from our past in order to fix it?
I think the way that I would frame the abundance agenda is that right now in the news media, there's a lot of talk about culture wars. There's a lot of talk about words, a lot of talk about symbolism. And I'm really interested in substance and material well-being. I want people to live in houses they feel comfortable in. I want them to have an abundance of energy. I want them to have an abundance of income. I want them to feel like they have an abundance of time to do that which really is important to them. And I, of course, want them to have an abundance of life. I think that America, as the richest country in the world, should have citizens that live longer than countries in other parts of the world, because what is more important than an abundance of life? Yet what I see in the economy is one crisis of scarcity after another. We were told, for example, during the pandemic that we shouldn't wear masks because there weren't enough to go around. In the early part of the vaccines, we were told not to get boosters early because there weren't enough to go around. There was a baby shortage formula. There wasn't enough baby formula to go around. There aren't enough houses to house people. There aren't enough doctors to treat people. We live in a crisis of a scarcity mindset, and we need policies of abundance to create more of that which is really important to us. More healthcare, more housing, more shelter, more life. That's a really, really important message. And it's really important, I think, for me to not just make that a kind of, bumper sticker, but to make it a real set of policies. And that's what I'm doing in my newsletter.
Where do you think that scarcity mindset originates from? Who does that scarcity mindset benefit?
It benefits sometimes those who have and are greedy and don't want to share it. People who have big houses and don't want apartments built near them, that is greed. They don't want the value of their house to go down in the short run, and so they restrict building near their house. They are NIMBYs, you could call it. The American Medical Association purposefully advocates for limiting the number of residency slots for doctors. What does that do? It shrinks the number of total doctors in America. What happens when you have an artificial scarcity of doctors in America? It means fewer overall doctors, and also encourages doctors in our extremely debt-burdened medical system to become specialists rather than general practitioners, which means there aren't as many primary care doctors in America, and we see this in the OECD data. So I think that greed is a huge part of this. I think scarcity comes from this sense that the pie can't grow because if it grows, somehow we'll lose out, right? We speaking now as those with means. I think it's really important for us to see beyond the horizon of that scarcity mindset and see how abundance can really help all of us.
Yeah, well, like I said, everybody go subscribe. Derek's also got a great podcast. We'll put a link down there in the description. Highly recommend it. Somebody that I genuinely a must read. So thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
Great to see you, Derek.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. As a reminder, we got that discount going on. Counterpoints discount Friday. It launches also same day as our live show, which is crazy. We'll be in Atlanta exactly a week from tomorrow, so that'll be fun. September 16th. Make sure it's going to be a great time for those who are going to join us. As we said, we've literally been in discussion. We're going to have some of the new dates that are being announced piecemeal, and we'll sell out those dates. It's going to be exciting looking at the calendar and figuring out which cities
on the road.
Yeah, I miss it. I mean, it was one of the great moments, really. Right before the pandemic, we got to meet some of our family. I still found it incredibly valuable because there are things about the show that you don't even think about, which mean a lot to other people. And every once in a while, you meet somebody and you're like, "Wow, I didn't know that." I said something like offhand, and like that meant so much to me. I'm like, "Wow."
Yeah. Well, and the really revelatory ones are when people say the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
That didn't even occur to you.
Yes.
And you're like,
I don't think
oh,
about that.
Yeah. So absolutely. I remember. Even something small, like when we were back at Rising, we'd say, like, so what's on your radar? I didn't even really think of that as like a catchphrase. And then people were so into it.
People want Indeed We Do t-shirts. I'm like, really? Like you do? Listen, I mean, I'll look into it. I'd be happy to.
The t-shirts business, when you want to do it right, is kind of rough.
Yeah, it is rough, as we discussed, in terms of the margins. That being said, we will have t-shirts for sale, but please don't kill me. Just to be clear, To make something made in America and union made in this country is astronomically hard and astronomically expensive. So don't get mad about the price. It's not us that are setting it in terms of the labor. But we're happy to do it, obviously, because we believe in making it there and not making it in China and then selling it to you for $25 and paying only $6. Because frankly, that is the way people make actual money in this business. But again, the most efficient and best way in order to support us really is to just become a premium subscriber. So the link is down there in the description. Thank you all so much.
We got the promo going on. Don't forget, 10% off until October 6th.
October 6th.
So you got a little bit of time, but
28 days. I'm not good at math.
Yeah, and we had a lot of people already take advantage of the promo.
Yes, we did.
So thank you to those of you who did. It means a lot to us to get those annual memberships in. Just helps us be able to plan, expand, build. We're still in the hiring process. Yes. We got a lot of great, incredible, very qualified people to evaluate and try to figure out who's going to be the best fit for the show. So anyway, we love you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week.
See you next week.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.